Hello, boys and girls. I'm so glad that you are here today. We've got another Jesus Storybook story to tell, and so let's jump in. Today's story is The Girl No One Wanted, a story of a story of Jacob, Leah, and Rachel from Genesis 29 and 30. There were once two sisters. The younger sister was beautiful, and her name was Rachel. But the older sister wasn't beautiful at all. Some thought she was quite ugly, and her name was Leah. Rachel was the kind of girl who always gets invited to parties and chosen for the team. Everyone loves her. And poor Leah, no one hardly even noticed her. One day, their cousin Jacob came to stay. He was one of Isaac's sons, and he was on the run. Do you remember Isaac from last week's story of Son of Laughter? Well, Isaac grew up and had a son named Jacob, and he was on the run, and he was here staying with Rachel and Leah. Jacob had stolen and cheated and made some enemies, including his own brother, and now he was hiding. So Jacob had made some poor choices. The funny thing is, Jacob, of all people, was the one God gave the special promise to, the same promise he had given to his grandfather Abraham. Remember the promise? I will rescue the world through your family. But then God chooses people we least expect, as we'll see. So God chose Jacob, even though he lied and cheated and stole. God chose Jacob to be the one that he would say, I will rescue the world through your family. Jacob stayed a long time and worked for his uncle Laban. One day, Laban said, Jacob, I've decided to pay you for your work. What do you want? A sudden thought struck him. How about one of my daughters? Laban said. Jacob looked at Rachel and he looked at Leah. Who would he choose? Of course he chose Rachel. I'll work 7 years for free if I can marry Rachel, Jacob said. So Jacob worked 7 years, and at last his wedding day arrived. But that night, Laban played a nasty trick on Jacob. Instead of sending Rachel to marry Jacob, he sent Leah. Now in those days, they didn't have electricity, so it was dark in their tents, and besides, women wore veils, and you couldn't see their faces properly. So Jacob suspected nothing. See how they wore veils over their face during their wedding? The next morning, Jacob woke up and screamed. His new wife was lying beside him, but it wasn't Rachel. It was Leah. Jacob jumped out of bed. Laban, he cried, you scoundrel. But Laban said, work for me another 7 years, and then you can marry Rachel. So Jacob worked for Laban another 7 years, and at last Rachel became his wife. Now Jacob had 2 wives, but of his 2 wives, Jacob loved Rachel the best. You scoundrel! No one loves me, Leah said. I'm too ugly. But God didn't think she was ugly. And when he saw that Leah was not loved and that no one wanted her, God chose her to love her specially, to give her a very important job. One day, God was going to rescue the whole world through Leah's family. Now, when Leah knew that God loved her in her heart, suddenly, it didn't matter anymore whether her husband loved her the best or if she was the prettiest. Someone had chosen her, and someone did love her with a never stopping, never giving up, unbreaking, always and forever love. So when Leah had a baby boy, she called him Judah, which means, this time I will praise the Lord. And that's just what she did. And you'll never guess what job God gave Leah. You see, when God looked at Leah, he saw a princess, and sure enough, that's exactly what she became. One of Leah's children's children would be a prince, the Prince of Heaven, God's son. This prince would love God's people. They wouldn't need to be beautiful for him to love them. He would love them with all of his heart, and they would be beautiful because he loved them, like Leah. So Leah had a son whose name was Judah, and Judah would go to have a son who had 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 a son until Jesus was born. And God used Leah, even though Jacob didn't like her as much as he liked Rachel, he used her. And when God looked at her, he saw her as a princess And she was beautiful because he thought she was beautiful. Boys and girls, you are so specially important. You are beautiful because God thinks you're beautiful. And God has made you so special. A lot of people in Leah's life didn't think that she was special. And that might be the case for you too. Maybe there are people in your life who don't think you're special. But you are. You are special because God has made you special. Well, I hope that you think about that this week and that you are reminded of Leah and how the ways that God used Leah, even when everybody else didn't like her. I'll see you next time, guys.